Hey there, welcome to the continuation on the universal health system. So on this tutorial, we're going to go over how we can create a widget that is going to be used as a HUD for the player, and how to make a 3D health bar, which is another type of widget that we can use to have the enemy also display their health right above their head. So right now we do have the health system that is dealing damage to the player and also to the enemy. So if we have the enemy on the damage area, it is also dealing damage to the enemy, as we can see here, and the enemy gets deleted. So right now, let's first worry about the player. So let's go back to our health system folder. And over here on the health system folder, you're going to create a user interface widget blueprint like this. And then you can just click on user widget and click select. And now let's name this W underline and then player HUD. So this is the general player HUD, and on your game, for example, you may want to move this outside of the health system folder, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to keep it here. But this would be the general HUD that we see on the screen. So right now we have nothing in here. Now we need to add a canvas panel to just have a space where we can put stuff on. So here you would have things like your ammo and your health that we're going to have up here, and other things like the objective and minimap. So this is just your general HUD. So right now we're also going to create a progress bar. This is going to be the health bar of the player, so you can just click and drag it over here. And this progress bar can just be scaled like this. Now, what is a progress bar? So a progress bar is basically just a bar that shows from 0 to filled. And if we come over here on the progress, you see that there's this % here. So if we just drag this over here, you can see that the bar changes. So with this, we can have progress that goes from 0% to 100%. So now that we have this health bar here, let's just change the fill color. So have it at something like 0.4, and then change the fill color to something that suits your health on your game. So maybe like this green color. Now just compile. Another thing that I want to go over real quick that is very important, especially for widgets, is this thing right here. What is this? Well, this is an anchor, right? And it's going to be responsible for handling what happens to this health bar depending on the screen size. So this controls the screen size that you're going to have on your game. And here you can take a look at what would your widget behave like depending on the different monitor resolutions. So here you have a lot of different monitor resolutions. So you have things like ultra wide, so this one for example. Then you have lower resolutions, you have 1080p. So with this, you can control how the widget behaves. Now the anchors are going to be responsible for anchoring your widget elements into specific points of this widget. So for example, on this case here, you see that we have our anchor right over here on this upper portion. So if I change this, you see that it doesn't really change the position of this, right? But imagine if I had this health bar down here. If I try to do this, you see that there comes a point where the health bar doesn't really come with, right? And it doesn't really act as we would like. So imagine you have a health bar that works when it's like this, but then if you have another monitor that has a resolution that is a little wider, it wouldn't work like you would expect. So what you can do here is you can just drag the anchor to be anchored on this point down here. And this is going to make your health bar behave the same way no matter the resolution that you have. So this is very, very useful for widgets, and it's pretty important for us to properly see how the widget is going to behave on different monitor resolutions. So the anchors you can also change. Instead of just clicking here, you can just click up here on the anchors after clicking on the health, and you can choose where you want your widget to be anchored. Now, for example, imagine that I want a widget that scales with the canvas. So if you want, you can also have it like this. So this would make your widget scale with the canvas, and you can see that we can have like a very big health bar, always keeping in mind these two anchors, right? So this tangent aside, let's go back to working on the health bar. So I'm going to just bring this guy back here, have it at this size, and now let's just take care of spawning this health bar next to the player. So we can grab the, let me just take a look at the player class, which I think we can come over to world settings, and we have the game mode that is being used here. And there we go. This is our character. And what we can do is right at begin play. So let's just grab begin play. We are going to create widget. So this is just us creating the widget that we just created, right? So we are instancing that widget into the game. So we can just type player HUD, and this is the player HUD we made. If you want, you can also do a get controller just for the owning player. And then this widget is created, but it's not added into the screen. So you need to bring it over here. Just drag it out of there and then type in add to viewport. So this is going to add this widget to the viewport. Now if I hit play, you see that we have our widget on the upper section there. So now what we can do is we can go and work on the player HUD, right? So now that we have the health bar, we need a reference to this thing right here. So if you go back to first person character or your character, we have the health component of that character, right? We need a way to send information over to the player HUD on what is our health component. So right now, let's go over how to create variables that can be set as soon as we create the widget. This is very useful, especially in widgets, but let's just create a variable inside of the player HUD. This variable is going to be health component, and we're going to change the type of this to be of a health component. So this basically is a reference to a health component that exists in the world, which in this case is going to be the first person character health component. So now we can check instance editable. This is required if you want to set the value right as this guy is spawned. Now this is very important. Expose on spawn. This basically makes it so that we can have this. So let's just compile here. Go back to the player. Now you see when we are creating this widget, you see that we have like a little space here for the health component. So this variable is set as soon as this guy is created, and we can very easily click and drag our health component into this space, and now we have our health components feeding right into the widget. So we can click back on the player HUD, and now we are ready to work on a ratio. And a ratio is basically a number that takes a current value and a max value, and it takes a value between 0 and 1 to that ratio, right? So we have the percent here, and we're going to create a binding on our percentage. So you see that we have the percent that goes from 0 to 1. We're going to create a binding. Now, what is a binding? A binding is a function that is going to run every frame on your widget to calculate values that you want to update. So, for example, if I had a number of enemies that I killed, and I wanted to tie that number to an int variable inside of the player, I could do that very easily through the widgets binding system. So if we click here, we go back to the binding. Now this requires us to give a value between 0 and 1, preferably. So for example, if I leave this at 1 and I press play, our health bar is full. So if I have this at 0 and I press play again, you see the health bar is empty. Very quickly, just so it's easier for us to visualize, I'm just going to move this down so you can very easily see. Now we're going to drag the health component, and we are going to drag out of this, and we're going to do a get current health. Now this is the current health that we have, and then we're going to get max health. This is going to be completely dynamic. If you change the max health of the player, it's also going to automatically change your health bar, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to divide the current health by the max health, and this is going to return us a value between 0 and 1. So basically, if you have 200 health right now and your maximum health is 400, it's going to return 0.5, which is half of your health bar, pretty much. So right now we have a full health bar, and if we start taking damage, we start losing health, and then we die and we reset the match. So that's it for the player health bar. Now let's work on a similar system, but now we're going to do that for the enemy. So let's get started by just making another user interface, another widget blueprint. Do the same thing we did before, and now type in w_enemy health. And this, instead of adding a canvas, so basically a canvas is a space that is almost like your screen, right? So a canvas makes it so that we can very easily just resize this thing, right? Now, instead of having a canvas, I want to have a size box. Now, the good thing about the size box is that you can set a preset size that you want, and it's going to retain that same size. So let's just click on width override and then height override, and let's have 200 width and then something like 80 height, right? So this doesn't change anything over here, but you need to click here on fill screen and then desired. This is the desired size of our size box. Now let's make this smaller, so something like 35 or maybe even 20. And inside of this size box, we're going to add another progress bar. And this progress bar is going to be red and a little bit darker. And this is going to be floating above the character's, the enemy's head, right? And how do we do this? Well, we can just click on the enemy, open the blueprint of this enemy, and now we're going to add a widget. So there is this widget component here. You can just click, and this is gonna just basically add a widget to your scene. Now put that above the enemy's head, and now just select the widget class here. So you click on the widget, and then on the details panel, just type in enemy health. And there we have it. You see that it looks really big. So on the draw size, we need to have the same numbers as we have on our size box, pretty much. If you want to retain the same size no matter what, you can just click on the size box with the right mouse button and then wrap with scale box. Now, if I compile and save, you guys are going to be able to see what I'm talking about. You see that it retains the same aspect ratio. So now we can just change the draw size here, and it's going to automatically change the draw size. So we don't need to be exact on this. You can just have something like 180 and then, I don't know, 50, and it's going to retain the same proportions, which is very good. So I'm going to show you an issue with the 3D widgets, and that would be anti-aliasing. You see that they look a little bit pixelated depending on the area that you're looking at them, especially if you're looking at them from far away. So how do we fix that? Well, if you go back to your enemy, and then you, instead of space world here, you click on the world, now click on screen. So this is going to make it vanish from here. Now you click compile and save. But when you click play, it is going to show always facing the camera, right? So before it was almost like a plane, like a 3D plane that had a texture of your widget, but now it is just like the widget that you have down here. So we have this widget down here, which is on the screen. And now we also have this one, which is also on screen. Before it was just a 3D, an actual 3D plane on the world, but now it is a lot easier to visualize, and it's going to look a lot better, especially with anti-aliasing. So this is our enemy's health bar. Okay, so now let's go over on how we can get this widget to have the health component of the enemy. Now we are of course already having the widget class over here, right? So I think we can just create the widget and then set it. So we're gonna do the same thing we did on the player, right? So let's go to our enemy health widget. Let's do the same setup we did on the player. Just create a new variable called health component, and then type health component over here. An object reference. Now instance editable needs to be checked, and then expose on spawn. And we can create a new function, pretty much the same way that we did the a new binding that is pretty much the same as the player HUD binding. Now there are ways to do this a lot better. Okay, we could, for example, have just a health bar that is universal, and then we just plug the health bar on the player HUD. That would also work, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we can just make the same thing again, just so that I can show you that it's working. But if you want to expand on this later, for example, the enemy health is just a health bar, right? So you could, for example, come back to the player HUD, and if you type in enemy health up here, you can just have the health bar right over here, right? So this is a different way of doing it where it's modularized, but you would still need to have the health components into it, right? So going back to the enemy health, we do have the percentage here, right? So this is the health component. Now we're going to compile and save. And on the enemy now, what we're going to do is on the begin play of the enemy, we are going to push this up a little bit, and I'm going to do a sequence, because then we can organize the code a lot better, right? So I can just bring this to the second option. And on the upper option, we're going to create a widget, pretty much the same way we did the other one. Enemy health, let's plug our health component into it. And what we're going to do, you don't really need owning player for this specific thing. So we wouldn't need to get the controller. But if you want, we can just get, I think it's called get owning controller. No, that get controller. Yeah, that's it, get controller. Oh, this needs to be, never mind. So now that we have this created, we can just get our widget and then get or set user widget, and you can just connect these and connect this. What does this do? Well, you know, when we click on the widget here and then we set our class, like what is the class that we want, you can just click over here to just make this none. So this is not going to create anything. This is just going to be a widget component. Now on the begin play here, we create the widget and then we set the widget of our component manually, right? Because then this is the widget that we created, and it's a lot easier to manage like that. So minimize this, and if we hit play, the enemy has health, and if I start shooting at the enemy, you see that the enemy health goes down, and then the enemy dies. And if we have just 1 second, I think that's an issue with the projectile. When the enemy gets destroyed, the projectile tries to get another hit in, it seems. So let's just type in to see if it's valid. But before that, I'm gonna add more enemies onto the screen, and let's just start dealing damage to them. Yeah, we're having issues when the projectile hits the enemies last. Oh, I think I need to move this down here, because what's happening is I'm dealing the damage and then I'm adding impulse to this object. But if the object gets destroyed from this function, the object doesn't exist anymore over here, and then I am trying to use the object again, even though it's destroyed. So if we try this again, we're not going to have any errors. Yep, perfect. Also, I can bounce balls off the walls and hit the enemies, which is pretty neat. And there we go. So that's how you can make... oh, and the balls hit the wall and then hit me, and then it dealt damage to me. Yep, that is actually quite funny. So the projectiles are hitting me and dealing damage to me. Perfect. But yeah, that's it. That's how you can create a system that works on multiple widgets using the same health component. So leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more tutorials like this.